Hello and welcome to Chad Magic. Chat Magic. Today we're going to be sitting down, having a nice cup of tea and talking about one of our favourite things, Magic the Gathering.
Nothing too strenuous. We're not here to have a rant about Magic. We're here to talk about why we love it.
Yeah.
Just two mates on a sunny Saturday afternoon having a cup of tea and talking about their hobby.
Brilliant. So I suppose to kick us off, maybe it might be worth asking how you got into Magic.
It's a good question actually. So you got into it quite a while before me, maybe a couple of years before I started playing it. And obviously, I played the odd game of you when you talked me into it. But what actually really got me into playing Magic was watching game nights.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, because I remember you had it on in the background at yours once. I was like, oh, this is actually quite interesting. And I can't remember what episode it was. But then I actually started watching it myself at home in my own time. And ultimately, I think actually what really did it for me was Arena coming out on the iPad.
Oh,
then
yeah.
I could play it at home whenever I wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's really when I got into playing Magic. How about yourself?
So mine was actually a bit further back than that. I got into Magic when I was playing, I think it was called Duels of the Planeswalkers on the Xbox.
Ah.
So I think it wasn't the first Xbox, it was the Xbox 360.
And was that did you actually play Magic? Was it like the Pokemon trading card game? You had on the Game Boy, did you play Magic?
So my Pokemon trading card game on the Game Boy was a Japanese import version because it was so much cheaper.
Yeah.
So I actually still completed the game, but I completed it in Japanese, from Process of Elimination. So that's probably another story. But Duels of the Planeswalker, it was a little bit like that, yeah. But
Okay.
I was at that age. I was a teenager, I suppose. I can't remember what year that was. But basically, it was that time where having free games available to you, you would download them because it wasn't like there was the huge free game pool, and it wasn't like you had freemium games like you have now where it's like, oh, you can play for free, but if you want a skin or whatever. But I remember playing Duels of the Planeswalker thinking, what is this game? This is really interesting. And the thing that actually really got me into Magic was actually probably the art. So, I mean, if you take
the art is so good.
Yeah.
Double Masters 22, which I've opened a lot of, as you know. I just think that's some of the best art. The borderless cards, I've actually kept them all separately because I just think they're so good. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think coming from things like fantasy stuff like Lord of the Rings, and and when I was younger, I know we used to play a bit of Warhammer and stuff like that. But that kind of that big scale, impressive art that sort of took you to another world.
Yes.
I hadn't seen that with Magic and that fantasy world outside of maybe a Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think the vast variety of worlds that you can go to, especially these days, where just recently we've gone to sort of this feudal Japanese setting in Kamigawa.
Yeah.
Then the big city.
/cyberpunk.
And then we went to New Capenna, sort of 20s prohibition, mobster type stuff. I think there's something there for everybody. People maybe are into their Greek or their Norse mythology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sets based around that have come out recently.
Mm-hmm. And they come out so quick that it's almost that you will find something that resonates with you.
Yeah.
So for me, kind of the Innistrad stuff doesn't really resonate with me in the same way because I find that kind of horror stuff is a little bit done. I think the characters are really interesting.
Yeah. And the story was quite good if you did pay attention to the story. I just thought, in general, it's like they were trying to appeal to 15-year-old girls 10 years ago.
It was a bit Twilight for you, was it?
Yeah, it was a little bit Twilight for me.
But I think that's okay because one of the great things about Magic is it does change quite regularly, and there's a bit of an aesthetic that would suit everybody. But I think going back to when I first got into Magic, and obviously I had a big break from then until when I started playing in paper Magic, it was that original kind of fantasy art that really got me into it. I remember my first deck I think that I was playing on there was like a green-black elves deck.
Okay.
And so the take on elves was really different at the time because they had horns and things like that.
Yeah, Magic elves are quite unique in that respect, aren't they? They're not these elegant beings of grace that you see in most other fantasy.
Some are,
yeah.
It was that kind of Reese the Redeemed, Reese in Exile kind of elf. But I think it's a really good point actually, because one of the things that I think has always been fantastic about Magic the Gathering, whereas a lot of the things now players disagree on, they think, I don't like this, or I do like this, or this isn't for me, or why have they done that? I think the art is something that has always been up there.
Yeah, I think everybody can agree that Magic Arts is really very, very good. I don't see any other card game, and I have played a few others, where it even comes close.
Yeah.
And I actually don't think other card games are really trying to be that good.
Yeah, it's true. If you look at like Yu-Gi-Oh as an example, and you look at the art in there, I'm like, that's probably. I mean, because if you look at it, if you've never played a card game before, you could go either way. And Yu-Gi-Oh actually had its own TV show, which we used to watch.
Yes, and I remember we played the cards a little bit, didn't we?
Yeah, but it doesn't suck you into that world the same. And I think that world building aspect, that the art is at the heart of that, and
absolutely.
certainly of bringing it to us. So I think that was probably really. I mean, you could say, it was the free Xbox game, but I think it was the art that really cemented when I was like, what is this? And then.
So you came for the free game but stayed for the art.
Exactly, yeah. And well, the gameplay was fantastic as well. I was really, really interested in this. I remember, though, being frustrated the first time I came up against a blue deck, which I think would probably resonate with quite a lot of people.
I think my first game of Magic was against you with the blue deck, actually. It was the game night thing, I remember. And you bounced my board just on repeat, free vend, board wipes, all that sort of thing. Not fun.
It was game night 2019, and I was trying to get people to play Magic the Gathering, and I made probably the sin of the biggest sin you can make in teaching new players is, I'll take the blue deck, and that doesn't go very well. I don't think so. I think one of the.
I think you might have set my Magic career back by 2 years.
Yeah, probably because you were doing things with I think the mono white deck, and I was just I had Shipwreck Drowser. And I had I can't remember what the instant sorcery was, but basically I'd created this loop with these cards, and it was I was impossible to beat. I was doing all broken things, and I was just I've made a couple of mistakes here. And so later on, when I started playing you again, I'll be honest with you, I did let you win a couple of times.
That's fine. I still let you win sometimes now. So.
Well, that's not true, and we know it isn't. I'm always the threat, it seems. But I think that. And then I actually sort of ignored Magic for many years because it never permeated through to paper Magic for me. And then one of our friends, Matt, he posted a picture of inside a game store somewhere.
Yeah. And
it had Magic the Gathering in the background, and I think had it been gone through being a student and all that type of stuff to actually having a job and earning some money, I was like, well, actually, this is a hobby that I maybe want to try.
Yeah, and now that you can afford it and to play it in the way that you want to as well.
And the first step for me was probably going to, actually, probably the first barrier. And you may, because I was sort of the first one in our group of friends to actually sort of learn about Magic, maybe it wasn't the same for you. But Commander over the last couple of years has become this big format. It's become
its own animal. Commander basically is Magic these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the flagship. It's in the front shop window of what Magic is as Commander. But when I started, which was, for anyone who's interested, that was probably somewhat around Dominaria, not the recent Dominaria, the previous one just before the Ravnica block.
And I started at the very, very end of Kaldheim, I think.
Yeah, so you're a really new player, really,
very new player,
in the grand scheme of things. The point I was going to make was when I came into Magic as a player who'd never played and or never understood anything about the different formats, that was the big challenge for me, was actually... Hang on a second. I've seen on this website that they play Standard on a Friday,
and I still can't get my head around all the format.
Yeah, and then they play Modern and then there's Commander, and it just so happened the day I was free was a Commander night, and I bought the Bant deck, the ones with the Planeswalkers as Commander,
it was a pre-con, was it?
Yeah, it was a pre-con, and it was a real trial by fire because we were playing an 8-player game of Commander. So this is probably number 2 on the list of when you're playing with a new player. Don't play an 8-player game.
No.
I had no idea what was
play
going
an 8-player game.
I was Commander as well.
Because Commander, you're already sort of only playing for a quarter of the time, and it can be, especially if you're playing against a deck that does lots of things, or a player who likes to think.
Yeah.
It can be quite frustrating, actually, that you're not really doing stuff most of the time.
It's true.
8 players is a nightmare, frankly.
But what... I won't talk about the gameplay that, but what I will say is I probably bought a couple of things I had a deck builder's toolkit, or I bought a couple of booster packs or something to open. But when I went down, loads of players who were established gave me like a load of commons and uncommons and just gave them to me.
Yeah.
And I would really say for anybody who is an established player in Magic who has bulk cards lying around and you have the opportunity to give them to a new player, do it.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah.
Those cards, the chances of you finding a place for that common card or that uncommon that's, like costs 2p or whatever, it can help that new player to understand deck building and can help them to put together a couple of kitchen table decks.
Yeah, and they won't be the most powerful because obviously they're not buying all these very expensive mythics and the right lands and things like that. But this is a new player, and imagine sort of, obviously you've been in this situation, but I haven't. You go to a game store you've never been before, you don't know anyone, and people are just really generous. They, here's some cards for you to play with next time you come, that sort of thing. I think it's a really good way to welcome people to the community. And the more people in the community, the more people you're going to have to play with. And that is definitely worth occasionally giving away the odd card here and there.
But for you, would you say then, because for me, what kind of flipped the switch was that for me? That kind of, because
the social side of
things. Yeah, when I went to try the game in paper, I found that it was very welcoming. Interestingly, that was probably part of that was because it was Commander as well, maybe.
Well, I was going to say, because Commander obviously being a much more casual format, whereas had your first event been a pre-release or something like that, it would have been very different, I imagine.
But obviously, we can talk about pre-releases in a bit because it's one of my absolute favourite things to do in Magic, probably my favourite thing to do. Even though it does terrify modern players, it seems they just seem to be so worried about it.
It's like sticking a cross up at them.
Yeah. But for you, it was Arena.
Yeah, Arena, definitely, because it was just the convenience of being able to play whatever Magic I wanted, whenever I wanted. And I've played so many more games on Arena than I will ever play on paper.
Yeah, well, probably me too, actually. But for me, I suppose when I started, it was pre-lockdown.
Okay, so I got into it pretty much during lockdown.
Yeah, during lockdown. And I remember actually going out to buy like an old computer because I didn't have a laptop other than my work laptop at the time to play Arena. And I actually, but you're right. That was actually a big stepping stone is playing Arena because it allowed you to play Magic in your own home. But then there's also the side of things, whereas it's been perceived by some people as a negative because it's meant sort of like in a lot of stores, especially here in the UK, like the death of Standard.
Oh yeah, Standard on paper just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, the thing is, it does though. This is the thing is we don't really have Standard where we are. We don't really get a lot of Standard, but there are places for it in the other parts of the country. But Modern's obviously massive. Lots of people play Modern, but I think that I remember talking to. Richie, who is one of the joint owners of our local LGS Just Play, and he was saying, Arena is Standard now.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well accepted now. And the fact that the Standard World Championships took place on Arena, I think it's like Wizards of the Coast aren't even really trying to support paper Standard anymore.
I think that on balance, though, I would maybe, and I might get crucified in the comments for this, I've probably
say it.
No, I think it's actually probably worth it. I think it brings Magic to more people. Yes. And if you're telling me that you playing Arena helped you get into Magic, but not just get into Magic, become a player who can actually play Magic, because it's a big learning curve. And imagine if you go into F&M and every week you're getting hammered and getting beaten and all that type of stuff, and it's so expensive to experiment with decks and things like that.
Whereas on Arena, you can just do it for free, maybe a few wild cards here and there. And I think it just gives you that opportunity to play with cards that you maybe couldn't afford a playset of, or even one of.
For me as well, and I've had disagreements with other Magic players about this, Arena for me is absolutely free to play.
Yes.
I don't see Arena as a pay to win scenario, because I think if you actually do things in the right way, you don't actually need to do that. I actually think
you don't need to put money into it, definitely.
And people might disagree with me, and feel free to disagree with me.
And tell us why as well.
And why you would disagree. But I think generally the people who spend money on Arena are probably the people who have that maybe as the primary and only way that they get to play Magic, which is sad because for me, it's the sociable aspect is big. Also, people who are very much into doing lots of events and
Yeah,
things like
who really enjoy that
yeah,
sort of
who
thing.
really enjoy going to events.
And there are events where you can win money.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think-
big point.
I think that's a really good point you just made, though, in the sense that obviously I've got all my Commander decks there, thousands and thousands of pounds worth of cards.
Sure.
If I'd spent all of that on Arena, I'd probably be doing very well on Arena, but it brings so much more joy to me to have the cards in paper and to look at them and to play with my friends as we do every week on the show.
Yeah. I think paying for cards on Arena ultimately is a little bit... I understand people who do pay being frustrated with the way that the economy works on it, because
Yes.
I don't think that it necessarily works. You can't go out and be like, right, I need 4 hopeful initiates. You got to be like, okay, well, I need 4 wild cards to,
Yes.
and so...
And there's no direct way to buy wild cards, is there?
Well, I think they might have been implementing a way to do it, but it was really poorly received because it was quite
okay.
expensive. But I suppose, like, for me, let's say, okay, this is how I would... If I was a new player to Arena, or if I was talking to a new player to Arena, I'd be complete your dailies and stuff like that.
100%. I still do my dailies 2 years on, however long it's been.
Yeah, and so, in a few days, you'll have 5,000 gold.
Yeah, do a draft.
Do a quick draft. Yeah.
And those sorts of things make you better as a Magic player, because drafting, as we all know, is about recognising which cards are the most powerful.
Yeah, understanding synergies.
Yeah.
And also, as well, before you've won a game, you've had access to 3 rares or mythics.
Yes.
I'm not saying you've taken them, but you've had access to them. And I think that because there are so many resources available online, through whether you're looking at YouTube, like like a top player, like a CGB or something like that on YouTube, who's rocking out these powerful decks, you can see what are the right ones.
Yeah.
You've got like Hello Good Game, does like a lot of like budget ones where it only uses common, uncommon, wild cards and things like that. There's so many resources available that you don't, so to stop you from needing to go and spend money on it, because I think if you go and spend £50 or whatever it is to crack 50 packs on Arena, I'm not sure how the gems convert and everything. There's no synergy there. You're not good.
No.
And I think that for me, the enjoyment out of cracking packs is absolutely a paper Magic thing.
Yeah, I've never been excited to crack a pack on Arena. And if you do your dailies, you're getting a pack every day, probably. I wish I could have a pack of paper Magic every day. I mean, with Amazon Prime these days, you probably could. But
you probably couldn't do it anyway, because you would just open them all.
yeah, I can't be trusted with sealed product.
Yeah, that's true. I can. Most of this is mine, which is why it's not open. So moving on a little bit from Arena, I mean, you've talked about Commander, you've talked about pre-releases, obviously limited. What would you say, and I know there's loads of different ones, but what would you say for you is your favourite format?
So, I mean, I'm very much a Commander player.
Yeah.
But Commander's actually, well, I suppose it is technically Commander, which is limited Commander. I love it. I think it's just so good because it brings all of the tactical aspects of limited.
So like Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Baldur's Gate. One of my favourite sets that probably my favourite set actually.
Yeah.
I've been to the pre-release for and I won it.
I wonder, is there a correlation there perhaps?
With my crazy mono black burn deck.
And that was great. Building a mono black deck at a Commander pre-release, that's amazing. I mean, I've only had the opportunity to play it once or twice, Baldur's Gate. But
and it's sort of at the kitchen table.
Yeah, at the kitchen table. It wasn't like a proper pre-release. Yeah, I was away on holiday at the time. And I know that set got a lot of stick in terms of value. I actually think that there's more value in it than people maybe thought. However, I think that's... I mean, there's a couple of there's a blue uncommon in there that copies a legendary creature for 4 mana.
And
that's creeping up.
Good card,
there's Wild Surge.
Wild Magic Surge.
Magic
I cracked
Surge.
one of those recently. But I think if you're focused on the value in the packs of a set as a way of me, deciding how good or bad is this set, I think you're coming at it from the wrong angle, because Baldur's Gate was not created to be a value draft. If you want value draft, Double Masters 22 is where you would go.
But then the draft experience isn't as good. I've played a few, and I would say that Baldur's Gate is much more fun to play with your friends.
An amazing limited experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So my favourite format, hands down, is limited. In particular, I love pre-release.
Yes.
I love everything about pre-release.
You go to like 4 pre-releases.
Yeah, pre-release to me is the best one because I think that it hits a nice sweet spot between being competitive and being casual.
Yes.
Now, weirdly, I'd say I'm a super casual player. So when we play here, winning is not the objective.
Yeah,
for
I'd
me.
say you're probably one of. I'm definitely more competitive.
Yeah.
I mean, except in the last game where I just took a load of damage for the fun. But yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because and you're right, it does hit a certain spot because people are often seeing the cards for the first time.
Yeah.
So it means that people aren't necessarily thinking, what's the best line of play? They're just they have to have a good time. Obviously, hopefully win some packs.
Yeah.
But the stakes are very low at the end of the day.
Now, it reminds me of something that happened, and Wizards made a decision, and I loved this decision. I think it was New Capenna, and they said we're going to release it in stores before we release it on Arena.
Oh, I remember
for the pre-release,
yes.
right? And I don't want to come at it from a negative angle as, why have they changed it back? That's stupid. But I wanted to come out from the positive angle of that. For me, was such a great move because one of the things I didn't enjoy about pre-release is the fact that people have already played with the cards.
Yeah.
That goes against the philosophy of pre-release for me.
I agree, and if it's not a pre-release, if there's been a pre-release,
even
if it's on Arena, it doesn't really make sense. Unfortunately, I missed the New Capenna pre-release. I was in Saudi Arabia, and the cards didn't get through customs.
But there was honestly, I would say that
these are the things
you signed up. Yeah. I loved it. There was some amazing cards in there. The witness protection is fantastic, making someone a legitimate business person.
And I think it's quite interesting actually with New Capenna how that set's matured in terms of the cards that are starting to become more and more chase cards.
There's been a couple of cards that have been really sought after in modern.
So Ledger Shredder was obviously going to be a great card the moment you saw it.
Well, people actually didn't see Ledger Shredder as that amazing card the first time they saw it. That was what was interesting about it. And there was also unlicensed Hearse
that's what I was going to mention.
Yeah.
Spiking in price. It's like £13 or something at the moment.
Because I think originally when people saw the set, people saw the completion of the Triome land cycle.
Yes.
Obviously they're not called Triome. You've got like Jetmir's Garden or all those type of ones. And I think people were like,
that's where the value
that's where the value are. There's obviously really interesting commanders. But I think just going back to talking about New Capenna a little bit, because I think people obviously were coming off the back of Kamigawa, which was a home run of a set.
So one of the most powerful standard sets I've seen
I just so enjoyed Kamigawa. I loved the flavour of it. I loved how it played. I loved how it played in 1v1. We play. We've not uploaded any episodes of this yet, so you won't have seen it if you're watching or listening to this. But we play a lot of 4-player limited.
Yeah,
and it's I would actually say to anybody, and I'm going to come back to a point on this about Magic maybe being a toolbox to create your own games from, which I think is absolutely true. When you play a set in limited and sealed, in Kamigawa, I did very well with Rakdos. It's not my usual.
And those are not your colours at all.
They're not my colours at all. They're much more your colours. Yeah. And I was super aggro Rakdos, and I think I got a second and a first. So not my colours.
It's interesting you say that, by the way, because Rakdos very much is my colours.
Yeah.
And one of the beginner decks on Arena is Rakdos, and it's based around that Kamigawa.
Oh, is it?
And I'm so awful at playing it. I'm genuinely really bad at playing it.
Well, I opened like 2 Oni Cult Anvils.
Well, that's what that deck's
and you have to be
around,
careful how you say that.
Yes, you do.
But the point I was going to make is, when you go back to say how we play, and if anyone listening to this hasn't ever played a multiplayer limited, I would really recommend to do so. Because you've got like Kamigawa, which is a really aggressive set, but then what you see then is, in 4-player, the aggressive set maybe is a little bit weaker compared to, the
aggressive playstyle.
Archetype, is less good. And then you see these more attrition-y, grindy decks sort of start to come through. But I thought that Kamigawa for me was a home run. Back to what I was saying about New Capenna. I think that helped. That allowed people
tangents
to,
ago.
Yeah. We'll reel it back in. New Capenna, I think, suffered a little bit off how good Kamigawa was.
Yeah, it was a big act to follow, and I think a lot of people maybe just assumed it couldn't match up.
But New Capenna was great. I want to talk about a couple of things that were really good about that. So the common lands. Both the towers and bridges,
very good man fixing there,
and also the ones that sack and you for a life. You get in a life, you find the card. Like Obscura Storefront is the one that springs to mind.
those ones, and you can get any of 3 types of basic lands. Is that right?
Yeah, so there was
Sack it as soon as it comes in, and then you
and it allowed you to fetch three different color basics, and I felt that in terms of a 3-color set in Limited is ambitious and difficult to pull off.
And it had been a few years since they tried it, hadn't it? I think Ravnica was the previous one.
But there was those 2 lands. No, Ravnica will be 2 colours.
Okay.
Yeah, because obviously you've got the guild. Yeah, you got the guilds of Ravnica. So before someone types in, what does Wally know about Ravnica in the comments or anything like that?
I wasn't even playing when it came out.
But Ravnica is where all the guilds come from. So like when you say Orzhov or Azorius or anything like that, or Rakdos, they are from them. So well, I'm glad that you say things like Rakdos and you're not coming in with the Strixhaven ones, which you could.
Oh my goodness, no. But Strixhaven doesn't even cover all of them, does it?
No. There's only 5 of them in Strixhaven. Yeah. But what they did in Ravnica is they had it was like a 3-block set with there was 2 Ravnica sets and then there was War of the Spark. Okay. So they had 5, and then a mixture. Yeah. So, but
back to New Capenna.
Yeah, New Capenna I think was really, really good. And then we go back one more tangent to reel it back into what our favourite kind of formats are. I think Limited is a good leveler from a financial point of view, which I think is
very important.
You know, I'm not a fan of who's paid the most so they win, which is...
It feels very anti-competitive, doesn't
it?
So
people know that Modern isn't my favourite format, even though I think it's a great format in terms of the skill level, in terms of some of the decks that are in there. I find that, there is a financial barrier to that. And I think, obviously, there are people who've been playing for a long time who maybe have some of those things. Well, actually, you've got a big jumble up with Modern Horizons, Modern Horizons 2 specifically. But I think for me, Limited is a good leveler, but also in many ways a better test of skill, because we live in a world where you can put into Google, you can put into Moxfield's, EDH Rec or whatever, take your pick.
Yeah, just download a deck list and
MTG Goldfish, download it. Net decking is what I'm talking about. You download a deck list. And I suppose actually that's a point, is I'm not a net decker. I don't like that. And so when I see a format, I see it as a challenge to go, what curveball deck can I create? And this is why I don't do well in constructed formats, is because I'm there turning up to, Pioneer with my Pioneer Pigeons Safari deck, because I think it's cool to bring it out. And then obviously I'm coming, 7th or 8th each time.
Yeah.
So we've talked a bit about Limited. We talked about a few different things. Going on to Commander.
Yeah.
One of the things that's quite talked about is the social contract around Commander. What for you is the social contract?
So I think it's a really, really interesting conversation, and people will obviously have different views on it. Let us know what you think. What is your view on the social contract? And I think first and foremost, particularly when you're playing with a new play group, it's very important to have that rule 0 conversation. Yeah. Because I think what the social contract, and obviously I think it is written down somewhere actually with specific wording, but I think the spirit of it is what it's meant to do is ensure that the table where Commander is being played is a positive environment for everybody. Yeah. So you're not playing in a way that's going to stop other people having fun. Yeah. And that's not to say you're not playing Control, because obviously Control does stop other people playing the game. Mm-hmm. That's how it works. But maybe with your Control, you're not specifically targeting one person. You're using it in a way that's conducive to your game plan. Yeah. And not necessarily singling out a player or singling out a play style.
So, I think there's 2 different things you're saying there, really. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. I agree with you about Rule 0. But I think there are players out there who only have fun when they are winning. Yes. That is their idea
and I've played against them.
Yeah, me too. And I think that is an immediate sort of red flag for me, because my style is completely different. I like to sit down and I want everyone to have fun. I want to see everybody's deck do something.
Yes.
I want us to be able to have some answers for things. I want us to be able to go back and forth and have a really kind of enjoyable experience. I actually don't have fun if I'm winning and everyone else is sat there being sad.
Yes.
That's like my nightmare of a Commander game.
And it gets quite awkward as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because especially if you go to your LGS and the people who, maybe this is the one night a week they get to play Magic, one night a month, maybe even less frequent than that. And you don't want to turn up and completely ruin somebody's evening. I mean, obviously, I think our playgroup in particular is quite a low level of competitivity.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, we're all good Magic players, and when we go to pre-releases... well, I like to think we are. When we go to pre-releases, we do go there with the intention of winning the game, but when you sit down at the Chad Magic table and play some Commander, you're there just to be with your mates and throw some cards down, have a laugh. You're not there to pick on somebody, you're not there to just win the game outright turn 3. And that would be really not very good content anyway.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think it's about ensuring that the table is a positive space. And that means not playing in a way that's going to upset people. And some people will get upset by certain types of Magic, but I guess that's just the nature of the game, isn't it?
Do you know what's really interesting about what you're saying? And this is actually a real... I completely agree with you on this, is that neither of us, when we've just been speaking for the last couple of minutes around the social contract, have mentioned power level. It's almost like the power level is actually a secondary thing there. It's more about the fact that, do you only... My conversation with Offer Rule Zero will be like, what do you enjoy from playing Magic? And if theirs is, well, I want to win, of course, that's my big, well, hang on, you know...
this is not the table for you.
Yeah, this isn't...
Go see a CEDH night.
Go to a more competitive table and things like that. I've played games. I played one recently, and this was a Commander League or LGS, which is probably my own fault a little bit because it introduces a level of competitivity. It's still, I'd say it's like casually competitive.
I think that's fair, yeah. I mean, I was there that night as well,
and I always bring up the thing about people running off-colour fetches and stuff like that.
You hate off-colour fetches.
I think, for me, and I know there'll be people listening to this who will run off-colour fetches in their Commander deck. For me, you are running to the extreme value level of your Commander deck. You are pushing that deck. You're fine-tuning little pieces of it. For me, I'd rather have more decks.
Oh, yeah, same. Variety, lots of different ways of playing. I mean, I've got 6 Commander decks, all very different.
But the pod I was playing in, I was the only one talking. Everyone was really quiet and really concentrating on what they're doing. I was thinking, this isn't limited. This isn't Pioneer or Modern. This is Commander. This is like a social game. And I'm not saying that anyone else is wrong. I'm saying for me, my perception of it.
No, and I'm absolutely the same. Commander is a social experience.
Yeah. And so the power level of that deck was playing Muldrow there. And the power level of that deck was actually pretty high, and mine was very low. But that wasn't my kind of gripe. My gripe was that player had turned up to win.
Yes, and you don't put off-colour fetches in unless you're eking every last little bit of value out.
Or it's your favourite deck, your signature deck. That's the one deck you're going to do it in. But I think that people would maybe disagree with us. I don't think that everyone would agree and say, oh, okay, I've seen game nights and stuff with off-colour fetches in it.
Oh, yeah, but I think the point is we're not specifically singling out off-colour fetches as something that you shouldn't do. Because there are advantages to having them. I think it's more the mindset of, obviously how much is a fetch land? About £30, £40. They've spent that for a very small increment in the power of their deck. And really, it just helps them with their mana fixing. It's not going to win a game.
In that one as well, there's the argument of, okay, just stuff at the graveyard, so bringing like the lands back and makes
That's a good point.
And makes sense. However,
in a Muldrow
the level of that, the cards that were in that deck, it was pumped to the max. And coming away from the power of the deck, because that's always going to be a case, and I've got no gripes with people running a powerful deck. I run a powerful deck from time to time. I know you've got a higher power level deck than me. But I think the problem I'd had with that particular pod, and I'm singling out that player, which I shouldn't really do, but it was a combination of the other 3 players I was with, because I've been put with those players as part of the league. I have never had less fun in a game of Magic, because people were not there to have fun.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one thing I find interesting, I was sort of reflecting on the 3 episodes we filmed so far at the time of filming this. The things I remembered about the games were not the crazy plays, and obviously you do remember some crazy plays, but the most memorable things for me were the jokes that people cracked, the times that we all laughed, or somebody made a funny attack, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I remember, so obviously that's what speaks to me as a Commander player. Mm-hmm. Where other people might remember, oh, that was amazing when I played that Ulamog, or whatever. And don't get me wrong, I would love to play an Ulamog at some point. But yeah, I just feel like Commander is, for me, first and foremost a social experience.
Yes.
Winning the game is secondary.
I think that it's one of the beautiful things about Magic is there's so many formats, but I don't want to be exclusionary and say, oh, you know, and be like a gatekeeper. You can't play because you only like winning. That's fine, but that you have there is a circle for you.
Yes, yeah.
And I think the thing that frustrated me is like I really was looking forward to playing some Commander, and my deck got to play some stuff, but there was no fun, there was no laughter, there was no because people's decks weren't winning.
Yeah,
they weren't enjoying the
themselves.
game, and I'm just like, that's not Magic for me. But the thing is, we're like newer players in the grand scheme of Magic.
Very much so, yeah.
So maybe we're a different way of thinking where people, you know, because Commander's actually, you know, not a format that, you know, there was standard way before, you know, Commander and everything, and it's always been a competitive game, like professional Magic, Pro Tour and all that type of stuff. And that same night, the first pod we were in was completely different.
We were in this one together, weren't we? It was a really fun game, that.
Everybody was having fun. And it was upbeat, and it was like this complete dichotomy for me. And so, going back to the question around the social contract, for me, I think it's just about understanding: are you here to like stop people from having fun so you can win? Are you here to just win? And it's more about what that player is wanting to get out of the game rather than what deck they're running. Don't get me wrong, there's also that. So it's also like, okay, you've got Rest in Peace in your deck and you're playing Arumi, and it's like, well, I might as well not. Your deck maybe is going to shut off my deck completely, and then it's not going to be enjoyable for me. And there's that type of it as well. But for me, when I sit down, my rule zero is I'm here to have fun, and I don't mind not winning. But my biggest gripe would be if only one person has fun from that table. What's the point? What's the point of spending an hour and a half playing a game?
And I think you've hit on a good point there about the rule zero conversations, because people might be wondering, actually, how do I have that? I think sometimes it can even feel a bit taboo, actually.
Yeah.
Particularly if you go to an organised event where it's not at your house or at your table or whatever. And I think probably the best way to approach that question is to say, what are you here for?
Yeah, that's a good way. So you know, it's actually really interesting to know if anyone listening to this or watching this has got any particular thoughts. You might disagree with us completely. I think that'd be a good question to ask. It'd be, you know, what is your rule zero, or what is your social contract that you have? I think it would probably be massively influenced by the type of games people have, whether they play with the same play group all the time or not. Because for us, we play roughly with a similar group of people, and then
7 or 8
people, and then occasionally bring it out. And I find that even players who are quite competitive, if they sit down thinking, oh, well, actually, all I'm here to do is have fun, and you have the right rule zero, you have the right social contract, you have the right basis, that good foundation leads to that player understanding and having the right expectations from the game. So I would say it's always worth having that conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And it doesn't have to be a case of, you say at the Rule Zero conversation, we're going to ban counter magic, or we're going to ban Eldrazi or something like that. That doesn't have to be the level of detail you get into.
I mean, I'll be honest, I've never had like that kind of like, oh, we're going to... I have had before, right, we only want one blue deck.
Yeah.
And I completely get
That's
that.
Quite sensible,
you know, you don't want to be sat 4 control decks around a commander table. I mean, come on. You don't want to be 3 commander decks around the commander table. Imagine me playing Gishath and everyone's playing control. I'd never be bringing out any big dinosaurs ever.
It would be a very sad evening for you.
Yeah.
I think I remember I was watching an episode of Ristic Studies and it was talking about control magic. And there was one game, it was at a World Championships, where both were playing control decks. And it got to something like turn 8 before anyone made a play. So they're just land pass, land pass, land pass. That's not Magic for me.
Do you know, I've played in games like that on like Arena.
Yeah.
Because in spite of what the first few episodes entail, I do enjoy playing Control.
Yeah.
But the more I play and things like that, I think it depends on what type of format you're in. And I think Commander for me, my Yorion deck it really does control players out of the game. It's very, very good at controlling players out of the game.
Yes, it's a very salty deck.
Yeah, and so one of the big, it was a big learning curve for me, was I love playing this deck, but everybody hates me playing this deck. And it's not a case of it's because I win the game, it's because they feel they haven't got to express themselves. Because that's probably a good point about Commander and deck building in general. A lot of things is like net decking, is like trying to find the most powerful thing. So if you're like playing like Pioneer, you might be like, oh, okay, what's the top tier deck?
Download a deck list.
Download it. I'll go buy that. When it comes to Commander, there is like a little bit of self-expression in there.
I completely believe so. Yeah.
And not just in the cards you put in, but like your style of cards you put in. Do you go for like the showcase foil, or do you go for a certain thing?
And you know that I'm a sucker for a borderless card.
Right. And I think it's almost like in some cases you're stopping people expressing themselves.
Well, if you're stopping somebody playing, then yeah, and especially when Commander decks are in many ways meant to be an expression of the builder.
Yeah.
I think, it can affect somebody's experience, and it's just not a nice environment to be in if people feel like, or even if just one person out of four feels like they're not being allowed to do their thing, and it's in someone's fair way because maybe they've been singled out, or maybe they've just been unlucky with their choice of opponents.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you have like players who are salty, in inverted commas, or things like that, some of that can be put down to different things like threat assessment for new players.
Yeah, you mentioned this before.
Yeah. So, like, I think that looking at things like that, I get why people might be salty. I mean, I've been in games where people have thought, oh, they're picking on me. I mean, actually, one of my first experiences playing Commander, a few years ago, pre-lockdown and everything, was, a player thought that, I was picking on them. I just didn't know what was the bad thing. I saw Lord Windgrace came out and I was like, that looks scary. I'm going to get rid of that. And people are doing probably broken stuff. So there's a bit of that to be excused. I think in general, as long as everyone is expecting to have the same thing, that's okay. But there are probably some pods I wouldn't want to be in. And those pods are the pods that are like, I have fun when I win.
Yes.
And if I'm not winning,
I'm not
having fun. That for me is a big red flag. I don't want to do that. I don't even want to play with that player in like Pioneer or Limited, really.
I think it's actually not a great way to be in Commander when you think about it, because you're probably winning about 1 in 4 games. So if you're only enjoying 1 in 4 games of Commander,
that's
why are you playing
it?
Commander?
Might not be the format for you. Yeah. Those who've watched our first few episodes, I think that was probably one of the things when you and I wanted to start the channel that was a big thing for us, is we wanted to maybe bring our style of play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We weren't there to be actors, effectively, playing a scripted deck or something. Yeah. We're bringing our own decks, we're bringing our own play styles, our own personalities. And it is very much a case of, we're going completely off topic now, but I want people who watch the episodes to feel like they're sat in the kitchen with us. They're laughing at the jokes, and they one day could be at the Chad Magic table.
Well, maybe they could
if we get big enough.
If we get big enough, we could do a fan episode. That would be fun. I think the point I was making was like our kind of brand of Magic, in that it's almost like, it's not that, because I don't want to come across that competitiveness has no place. We all kind of like do have like an undertone of it would be great if we won. Yeah. But it's just not number 1 for us.
No, definitely not. It's not number 2 or number 3.
Yeah. Number 1 for me is I want everybody to have a good time.
Yes.
That is, without a shadow of doubt, number 1. Number 2 is I want to see everyone's deck do their thing. And probably, to be fair, especially my deck. I want my deck to do my thing, and I want to see everyone else's deck to do their thing. And then 3rd or 4th or 5th.
Yeah, winning comes in somewhere.
Would be winning, maybe. But I accept that other players don't have that same... they're not in it for the same things, and that's fine.
And it just continues to underscore that 0-0 conversation, how important that is. Because when you're and you only need to have it. You don't need to have it every time you sit down at the table, but maybe when you form a new play group or something like that. I think it's quite important that you get an understanding of what each other is there for. Because if one person's there to win and everyone else is there to have fun, I'm not saying you kick that person out of the group, but that person then might be able to identify, actually, I probably need to have another play group in addition to this one.
There've been some episodes of other shows that I love and some that I don't love, and it quite often depends on the chemistry.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
I completely agree.
rather than you can. We've only done 3 episodes now, and I feel like in every episode, every person has enjoyed themselves, and so that probably is something that we enjoy. We can see, but sometimes when you watch certain episodes of different things, you see some players, and it's really obvious when someone isn't enjoying themselves. It's like it's
so hard to hide on camera. Camera sees everything.
Yeah, and so I think that for me, and I know for you as well, that's so important to us when we create those kind of videos, is that we want to bring the atmosphere that we think is the reason to play Magic.
Yeah, absolutely, and everybody plays Magic for different reasons. For me, it's very much about the social side of things. I don't tend to enjoy the competitions that much. Obviously, I really enjoyed being in Saudi Arabia when I was winning all of them. But
so that's interesting. So you're talking about like winning and how you really enjoyed that aspect. So you do enjoy to win, like everybody else.
But these were competitive games at the same time. So I only went to 3 competitions and won 2, came second in 1 as well. But it was good.
It's a bit of a boast, but
just casual flex.
Casually. I just won. I think won 2 of them, second in the other one. Yeah. Interesting. So they haven't invited you back then? So.
No, well, I don't have to go to Saudi Arabia anymore, thank goodness. Nothing against Saudi Arabia, just don't like being away from home.
Yeah, that makes sense. So moving away from the sort of the Commander question, what are you really enjoying about Magic at the moment?
Oh, okay, so that's a really interesting question. Actually, okay, so let's just go in a completely different direction, and bear with me here. Do you remember The Sims?
Yeah.
And the most fun part of The Sims was building the house. You never really bothered playing the game because it was a bit clunky, didn't make much sense, all that sort of thing. But you loved building the house, rosebud cheese, all that sort of thing. So I really enjoy building my Commander decks. Okay. Obviously, I love playing with them as well and that sort of thing. But bringing it all together, seeing new cards, doing the research, and just thinking of all these fun things that you could do at the table. That is what I'm really enjoying about Magic.
Seeing the pieces coming together.
Exactly, like assembling a jigsaw.
Well, I think that's the engineer in you.
Yeah. I think you're right, actually.
Yeah, so I think that, that's it. That's interesting. Maybe we're letting our professional side creep into the game. But do you know what's a really good point there? Because we were talking before about self-expression.
Yes.
And whether or not you're able to express themselves, and deck is a way of doing that. So if yours is the deck building, I actually really understand where you're coming from, and I love it when you have a restriction that makes it more challenging. And so we talked about like rule 0 and like maybe evening things out. I think a great leveler is to go, okay, here's a budget.
Yeah, and that's one of the very simple restrictions you can put in, but there could be all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Some people might say, right, so no foils or only commons and uncommons.
Yeah.
You can get very creative with this sort of thing.
Yeah, if you play like a pauper version or like an artisan version which only uses certain things, I think that's a really good one. And what I would say to people who are always trying to like push to the max, challenge yourself to maybe go, okay, you've got your 3 friends. Let's say you're doing something. Why not say, okay, £20, $20, or €20, whatever your preferred currency is. We're gonna set that as a budget. What can you come up with for that? And that sets it like a different thing, because then there's no. You don't have to worry if that's going to price some people out. Some people aren't going to be able to express themselves in that way, and I think that's a really, really good way of doing it. But I like what you're saying there, because I think that is the engineering. That's the thing that you find.
Yeah, putting all the pieces together.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I enjoy building my decks more than I enjoy playing with them, but definitely, I'm always excited for when I build my next commander deck, and that's why for me, when I see a commander that I love, like Around Me was one that I just happened to see on a group chat or something. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I must build this commander.
It's so interesting. It's such an interesting commander. I would say Around Me is a really, really good one, and the Graveyard Recursion is really, really good fun.
Graveyard Recursion is completely broken, by the way. It's so broken.
I played against that deck a couple of times, and you are very threatening with that deck, I would say.
But that's what I love, just seeing the card and thinking, oh my goodness, this card goes in that so well. Yeah. Especially when it's a card you don't own, and you've been looking for a reason to buy. So Worm Coil Engine, which goes in the Around Me deck. Complete commander staple, obviously. Yeah. And it's just so good to think, right, I finally got an excuse to buy this card that I wanted.
See, it's really interesting because you're kind of So I enjoy the building of the decks and things like that, and I think that I always see it as a challenge to build a deck that's like outside the box. Like, that's something that I enjoy. I say that it's difficult because, everyone who watched this has only seen a handful of things, and like the Gishap deck is like telegraphed on what that does.
Yeah, it's a very one-dimensional.
Yeah, it's a very one-dimensional deck. But the thing that I've been really enjoying is actually stepping into this world of content creation, and for me, it's given me a really great new set of skills that I'm developing all the time. I know you are too.
Oh God, yeah, we've learned so much in the past 2 or 3 weeks.
That's outside of what we do for a living. We don't do anything like this for a living. We do not have a filmmaking background or anything like that,
or an acting background. Or anything.
And going back to when I said about what I like to bring our brand of playing Magic, which is like inclusive and fun and positive, friendly.
Friends throwing down at a table together.
Pull up a chair. Let's throw down and have a game. That type of thing. I've really enjoyed that. Developing those skills has allowed us to like bring that to other people
and share it with them.
I think that's been really, really good fun. So I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back. I'm just saying that for me, I think that maybe that at some point that becomes a chore for people and making things, but editing video takes hours. But it's not felt like work. It's felt like something really fun. And when we've been watching the games back in the editing room, it's hilarious sometimes.
Oh yeah, some of the things people say.
Yeah. So it's been really, really good. And I think that for me, it's great to like be at the start of this journey, and there's so much more to come. And every time we do something, we learn a little bit more. And so I think that learning things all the time, also obviously making new and better friends, and solidifying some relationships with people who we've met through the game stores.
Like Bailey, Ollie, Nathan, good friends of ours.
Yeah,
met them completely through Magic. The first time we met all of them was at the local game store.
Yeah,
and now they're part of our playgroup.
And I think that's the beauty of it, and it's a privilege to be able to bring that to other people. And so I really hope that when people watch the videos and things like that, they enjoy them. It seems like people do. When you said before earlier, we're good Magic players. I'm not sure. But
Tell us what you think.
But what I would say is, this is going to sound really corny. We're good gathering players.
We've got the gathering bit nailed down.
We've nailed the gathering. The Magic part, maybe.
We're getting there, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I suppose that kind of like wraps things up.
Yeah, I've finished my tea now, so...
So we're going to finish here and go and grab another cup of tea. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Obviously, we're just sat here having a chat. Maybe have us on the background while you're getting on with something else, or you might have an opinion, you might think we're wrong about something.
And do let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
Because this is a discussion. It's not, I'd say round table, but it's square. But you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, I get it. We're not trying to say that we know everything. In actual fact, we don't. We just have a perception on things. And so let us know what your perception is, what you think. Is there anything you think, well, actually, that doesn't match up with what I like to do?
Yeah.
I like to do this. Let us know, because it might be a good discussion topic for us in the future.
I think I'm quite keen to hear actually for some more competitive players. So if there are any CEDH players maybe watching this, tell us what you really enjoy about Magic, because I've played CEDH a few times and it is lots of fun.
Yeah.
It's not, probably more for financial reasons, it's not for me.
Yeah.
But the more competitive players out there, let us know what do you really enjoy about Magic.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thanks very much for joining us. We're going to go and make another cup of tea, and we'll see you next time on Chad Magic. See you later.
Bye for now.